Hello. Today I thought I'd talk about puja. Puja. Why do puja? So, what is puja? Well, puja, as we know, is worship. So, it's a very strong word, worship, and it's one that I think most of us will probably associate with Christianity. And maybe we left Christianity behind a long time ago. Maybe we decided that once we didn't believe in a God, there was no point in worship. You know, we can often associate the word worship with paying reverence to a God. So that can be the reason that we reject or tell ourselves that there is no point in doing puja, or even that we're very resistant to doing puja. So why do we do it? I think there are several reasons. So Sangharakshita has talked a lot about how we need to find emotional equivalence for our intellectual understanding. We need to find emotional equivalence for our intellectual understanding. So, yes, today we can learn an awful lot about Buddhism from books, from classes, from courses, and we can think that we know what Buddhism is. We know exactly what it is because we've read all the books and we know all the various lists, of which there are many in Buddhism, and that is sufficient, that we understand Buddhism. But of course, understanding is quite different to simply learning the lists, or even having reflected quite a lot on the teachings of, things like the 3 laksanas, the 5 skandhas, and so on. But actually, unless we're really moved, unless our heart is engaged in our practice, we're not really going to get very far. And that's because where our heart is, you could say that's where our energy is. So the most obvious example is when we fall in love. When we love somebody, our whole energy moves in that direction. And we can find that we've got more energy than we've ever had before. So, for example, we might stay up all night with our loved one, and we're still not tired. We've still got energy. We can push our limits tremendously because that sort of being in love, that kind of madness that we're in, just gives us incredible energy. So where our heart is, that's where our energy is. And it takes time, I think, for our heart to really get moved by the Buddha's teachings. And initially, it's quite obviously because, we don't know enough or have enough respect for Buddhism to realise just how radical it is. How completely life-changing it is. And so we see it in a rather ordinary way. After all, there's lots of methods nowadays that we can improve our life, that we can make ourselves a little bit happier. There are many alternatives, things to try, self-help books, self-help therapists, and so on. And I'm not knocking any of those. They can be very useful, they can help us. But Buddhism is very radical. And it's radical because it offers us a way, a deep way out of suffering. If we have the courage, the persistence, the energy, and the heart to do it, to really engage. Now, emotional engagement can only come from us really seeing the value of what Buddhism has to offer, and that takes time. It does take time. And one of the things that's quite difficult for us here in the West is to, I'd say, to have sufficient respect for those who have gained enlightenment, or if you don't want to see it in that way, maybe you haven't got a clue what enlightenment is, and you don't want to use those terms. You could see that those who have those who we might admire for their compassion, for their selflessness, for their wisdom, if we really know how to have respect for those people and to aspire in that way, to aspire to be like that person, then to do that we need to recognize the gap. We need to recognize the gap, the huge gap between where we are now and really where we'd like to be. Who wouldn't like to be free of suffering? Who wouldn't like to be more compassionate and kind? Who wouldn't like to not get irritated, annoyed, or feel any aversion for anybody or anything? I mean, it's an incredible thought. It's an incredible aspiration to have in our heart. So to have that aspiration, we need to read about, reflect on people that have actually done that have got that kind of freedom. So behind me I've got Milarepa there, and there he is. You can see his ribs. He doesn't look a pretty sight in a way. He's not your typical Buddha image, because basically he leads a simple, joyful life. He doesn't need any material possessions. He doesn't need anything to be happy, just to be alive and to have seen reality, to know what's valuable and what isn't, is enough for him. So this is our starting point for moving towards an openness to this practice of puja. So in my mind anyway, I would say puja is just as important as meditation. In a way, meditation is, turning inward to ourselves and getting to know our mind, fantastic. But puja allows us to share in a community, because generally puja is done with other people, to share in a spiritual community our aspirations and to recognize the gap between ourselves and those beings who have gained enlightenment. So there's phases through the puja that express the whole of the spiritual life, the whole of what we're aiming for, the whole of what we're holding most dear in our hearts. So it's obvious from already having taken the time I have that I'm going to have to say more about puja on other videos. So just to reiterate, the purpose is to recognize the gap between ourselves and those who have gained some sort of freedom that we aspire to, and to verbalize externally, so that's very important, with other people, what those aspirations are, how important they are to us. And in doing that, we start to feel it more. It's not private, it's not some little thought that flashes into our mind and goes out again. It's much deeper than that. We are expressing something with body, speech and mind. We engage all of ourselves in puja, body, speech and mind. So I'll say more about that tomorrow. Bye for now.